여기 붙어라 모두 모여라 We gon' party like 리리리라라라 맘을 열어라.
Japan. Now what does it mean to normalize relations? Korea and Japan didn't have any diplomatic relations after World War II. And in 1965, 20 years after World War II ended, South Korea and Japan finally normalized relations. What does that mean? Exchanging ambassadors, for one thing, so you recognize each other. Does South Korea recognize North Korea? Does the United States recognize North Korea? No. We do not, diplomatically, officially, we say that North Korea does not exist.
North Korea
Does not exist, okay? So Korea and Japan didn't have diplomatic relations until 1965. When they got diplomatic relations, everybody accused Park Chung-hee of being Sakura. Sakura. Sakura is the Japanese word for cherry blossom. No, it's not like pansy. It's like being pro-Japanese. It's like being a closet.
A pansy.
Park Chung-hee, who was the president of Korea at that time, he took over in a military coup. He's a military guy. So, when he recognized Japan, there's a lot of anti-Japanese sentiment. But he needed to recognize Japan because he wanted Japanese investment to get the economy going. Park Chung-hee, if he didn't do anything else, got the economy going, okay? So to get the economy going, he needed Japanese money. To get Japanese money, he needed to recognize Japan. To recognize Japan, there was a tremendous opposition to that. And to show that he was a true Korean, he built a bunch of anti-Japanese monuments. That's when this was built. Who was Lee Sun-shin? The general that fought the Japanese in 1592. He died in the last battle of the war. I'll tell you the story sometime. So, Lee Sun-shin. This is the statue of Lee Sun-shin, and to me, it has significance because it's built by Park Chung-hee, sort of an anti-Japanese statement. Yeah, to the Japanese when he had to turn to the Japanese for economic aid. So it's sort of the two hands of political action. So that's what this represents. Now, and for a long time, this section in Seoul was like 10 lanes on that side, 10 lanes on that side. And in the last 3 or 4 years, they put this closet in the middle with the water that the kids can play in. And they put in the So Lee Sun-shin has been here since 65-ish or so.
I don't want to talk
66, 67, something like that. Lee Sun-shin is new as of about 3-4 years ago. Excuse me, Lee Sun-shin is here. Sejong is new. Sejong is the next king. And then the pagoda is up behind that. We'll talk about that as we go through the script. Yay! He's created under.
Why is he upset on the last time?
Because Sejong up here invented the alphabet. So this is sort of Sejong's Plaza.
Woo! Go Sejong Plaza!
Sejong Yopa.
Sarah! Enjoy! Woo!
A star and a planet,
Yes. Yeah, the planets are a lot brighter.
and they move. The planets move. The stars don't move. Anyway, that's what this is all about. They had very good astronomy back in those days. And the reason this is here is when King Sejong became king, he put a lot of effort into cultural and scientific things, including an astronomical planning chart. You know, if you're smart, you can figure out which planets are where when they're appearing and such. And it's a hard science to figure out, but you can do it. These days, I have an app. And I can look up and see what Jupiter was there the other night, and Saturn was coming up, and Mars and Venus and everything is around the sun right now, so you can't see them. But anyway, they planned on all of this. They could see it all. They kept records of unusual events, comets, and all that sort of stuff. So this is one aspect of Sejong's science.
They were like Mayans.
This is another aspect. Okay, Chinese characters. What does this say? This is juk to measure. U is rain. And what's that character? Jung, I think. And it's a rain gauge. And they put these kinds of rain gauges all around the countryside so they could measure the amount of rainfall here and there and everywhere. So they had a scientific measure of rainfall. And so that's what this represents. That was another of King Sejong's inventions. developments, yeah. We also did a water club. And a heshige and a sundial. Here's the sundial. And if you look on his money, here's the astronomical thing on the background and emphasizing the science of him. And in the old money, I've got old money. In the old money, it had all my receipts here. Here's old money. Where is it? Here's an old Manwantari.
Wow, you have those?
Yeah, and here on the front is a rain gauge. This thing on the front here, excuse me, not a rain gauge, that's a rain gauge. This is a water clock. They had an elaborate system of water dripping through these pipes that you could use to measure water, measure time, because water will drip at an accurate rate. Now think about this. This is before you could buy a Rolex. This is before the Swiss watches. They had to have a good timekeeping mechanism, so that was here. And this is for telling the time by the sun. You know, in the old days, people didn't have watches, and you didn't know what time it was by looking on your wrist, but you could always tell what time it was by just looking at the sun. And the same thing with the days of the month. They could always tell what day of the month it was by just looking at the moon, because it was a lunar calendar. And so you knew it was the first day of the month because the moon was dark, or the moon was full as the 15th day of the month, or halfway in between. So you always knew what day it was by just looking up at the stars. And the last major invention, of course, was Hangul.
Sejan, Danya.
Uri Naramari, Chungukwa Tali. What does that say? Our language is different from the language of China, right? And yet, before Hangul, they didn't have any writing system except for Chinese. And they had to adapt Chinese to express Korean words. It was very cumbersome. It's a system called the Idu. I'll tell you about it later. But here he's saying our language is different from Chinese, therefore we need our own script.
No, it's going down.
It's important to remember that Sejong did not invent the language.
I know it's going down. Yes.
It's going down this way.
Yeah, right to left.
So when did they switch left to right?
After 1900. Traditionally, you go this way.
Is there still copying Japanese?
What?
Chinese.
I mean Chinese.
Chinese, yeah.
Chinese
This is the original version. This is modern version. The original had all these dots showing tones and different things, but this is the modern version.
So they got rid of the dots when they don't do tones anymore? Is that
Yeah. Actually, they never did do tones very much, but they thought they did. They thought they should mark it, but it didn't serve a useful purpose. And what was Hangul called when Sejong invented it? It was not called Hangul. Hangul, Han is for Hanguk. They could call it Chosangul, but he called it Hunminjangum. That was not only the name of the proclamation, but that was what they called the alphabet. And in a shorthand form, they called it Ongul. But then Ongul, On means common, ordinary.
Did it change from that?
Yeah. Hangul only came in after 1948.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Hanguk is the name for South Korea developed by Syngman Rhee after 1948. So in North Korea, they never say Hangul. In North Korea, they never say Hanguk. In North Korea, it's Chosun and Chosangul. In South Korea, you wear a hanbok. In North Korea, what do you wear? Chosunbok. Okay, here's Sejong.
Sejan, 안녕. So this is the palace in the heart of Seoul. There's the first main gate that we came through, and the huge courtyard. So many people. There's side gates. This is the next giant gate. 예뻐요. We're about to go into the palace. This is just a little taste of what the emperor had to look at.
Hoxings everywhere.
Yes, from Jacob's perspective. Yeah, like those are the main gates, and if you look down, it's a straight shot out to the city. So impressive. And then coming to the right, there are some mountains over there. 너무 예뻐요. Huh, Cheryl?
You see, doesn't have this on it, unfortunately.